I'd like to give a very warm welcome to everyone joining us for our conversation this evening. My name is Tara Westerman. I'm the former managing director of Vivian Art Gallery, and it is my pleasure to be acting as moderator for tonight's event with the 4 participating artists featured in Vivian Art's Art Toronto 2020 exhibition, Abstraction to the Power of 4. And I will introduce each of these fabulous panelists, and so please take note as well that one of the squares in the video feed will be actually taking us around the physical exhibition in the gallery in Calgary. And so you will be able to see the work of each artist as I introduce them. So if I could ask each of our artists to please raise your hand as I introduce you. Our first exhibiting artist is Serena Beaulieu. There's Serena. Serena holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Concordia University in Montreal, where she currently lives and works. Since graduating in 2017, her work has been the subject of numerous solo and group exhibitions in Toronto, Montreal, and Calgary, and found its way into the homes of many private collectors. So next we have Sarah Nordine. And there's Sarah's work here. So Sarah Nordine lives and works in Calgary, Alberta. She holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Alberta University of the Arts, where she also currently teaches drawing and painting. And she completed a Master of Fine Arts from Emily Carr University. Recent projects include her participation in the White Rabbit Arts Residency and Festival, the Carmichael Canadian Landscape Exhibition at the Aurelia Museum of Art and History in Ontario, solo exhibition in Arts Commons in Calgary, and inclusion in the Istanbul Design Biennial in Turkey. Sarah's work is held in the collection of the Alberta Foundation for the Arts and numerous private collections as well. And then next in our gallery rotation with this lovely big painting is Sean Evans. Here's Sean. So Sean Evans holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts, also from the Alberta University of the Arts in Calgary. His work has been the subject of numerous group and solo exhibitions across Canada, is held in many private collections and the permanent collections of corporate and public institutes, including the collection of Jim and Susan Hill of the Esker Foundation, Air Canada, and Field Law Calgary. And he currently lives and works in Toronto. And then I will let our lovely video feed director get to the other end of the gallery with the work of Scott Everingham. There's Scott. Scott Everingham holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design and a Master's of Fine Art from the University of Waterloo. His work has been exhibited throughout Canada and internationally in the United States, Denmark, England, and the Netherlands. He's represented in numerous public, private, and corporate collections and has been a 3-time nominee for the prestigious RBC Painting Prize. Everingham is also a painting instructor at OCAD University in Toronto, where he lives and works too. So I'm so happy to have the opportunity to connect with all of you tonight. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Tara.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Tara.
For this discussion, I hope that we can have a lively conversation as we parse through some of the ways in which you are working and thinking about abstraction. And for those attending, I hope you may garner an insider's look into the brilliant minds of these talented artists. So also please feel free for those of you joining us to collect a drink for yourselves to settle in with us, because we all have our respective evening art event refreshments too, apropos. And so with that, I would like to raise a glass to all of you, Sean, Serena, Scott, Sarah, and also the amazing Vivian Art team and all of you joining us tonight. So cheers.
Cheers.
And so we can get into it. Okay, so yes, all of these questions will be directed to each of you. So I will ask one of you to start, and then hopefully we can just carry on and go back and forth as you like. And please feel free to ask each other questions in the dialogue too. So, first question. So I wonder how each of you are negotiating a tension between abstraction and representation. I've had the fortunate opportunity to talk with each of you individually, and that has certainly come up. So, so Sarah, if you wanted to start us off, maybe.
Sure. I negotiate that tension between
abstraction and representation through use of organic shapes. So I think it helps me actually to think representationally while I'm making the work, even though it does have abstract qualities. So I'm usually thinking about like an aerial view of place, or I'm thinking about monsters and creatures, or I'm thinking about a microscopic view, often at the same time. But while I'm making, I'm imagining it's something real, but I guess it's the actions that I use that make it look abstract.
That's good. Anybody else want to go next? Sean?
Oh, it's a fun question, because for me, it's sort of what loosely ties this show together. I think we're all abstract painters first, but we're all sort of dealing with representation, or well, we're in the studio, like grappling with ideas around representation as we paint, and how that sort of fits into the narrative of abstract painting. For me, I found abstraction a lot easier when I started putting my own interpretation, sort of my own feelings or emotions into the paintings. And since then, it's grown and grown and become almost much like really important to how I paint now and think about my paintings in terms of representation. And I guess not being as apprehensive about it as I used to be, if I can leave it there.
I mean, I think that's kind of interesting to think about how we're coming into this representationally, possibly, because Sarah, what you said really kind of ties into what I do as well, where I'm thinking about you know, these kind of like structures, these environments, these spaces that can you know, potentially exist somewhere, but are all made up of this abstract language, and this kind of these moves and these spaces that are developed on the canvas that could potentially, and you know, almost as like an overarching idea, talk about bigger thoughts, or the human experience, or you know, something that is rooted in reality or rooted in representation, but we're using different language to do that.
Yeah, totally. I think I relate to what all of you have said about this kind of surfing on the line of maybe the in-between figurative and abstraction, and yeah, getting inspired by figurative or by the reality, but then also not painting it necessarily, if I make any sense. But anyways.
Yeah, it sounds like certainly a lot of you are probably playing with a reliance on intuition. So I wondered, how much do you actually trust it? How much do you trust your intuition, or any process requiring spontaneity, as much as a requirement as it might be? Like, is it very scary? Want to take this up, Sean?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, my work starts, I begin a lot of these paintings from photographs, which in a way, like, there's no spontaneity to it. So a lot of that risk, or a lot of, in some ways, that abstraction like comes through spontaneity of the painting process, of putting that down on canvas, of sort of trying to mask that reality, sort of pull it back, push it out. A lot of that happens through painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Serena, I just in the video, actually, I noticed you specifically we're talking quite a bit about intuition.
Yeah, actually was thinking when you asked the question, how much do you trust your intuition? I was really thinking about the question, and I think I just don't ask myself enough, should I not trust it? Because I think I rely on it maybe too much in some ways. Yeah, maybe also it feels like if I feel it intuitively or in my like a gut feeling, then it feels right. And if I don't feel it like in this way, then I start questioning it more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the language of like in the paintings that I work on is totally the same way, where you're really like trusting that intuition, but I also want to look back at moves that I did, say, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and really think back to what my gut was telling me then, and to trust that and bring it forward into new paintings, because languages that worked for you 10 years ago can still work for you currently, and may still work for you, may work for you 10 years in the future. It's just a matter of I think taking that and, using it as that sort of gut instinct, like, you know what, this was a solid move 10 years ago. Why can't it be a solid move now, with sort of a new language that's being put together in a painting?
I think it's interesting in that sense to see what comes back 10 years after, also what you sort of repeat naturally, or where your mind goes back even after a long period of time. I think that's totally fascinating when ideas like that can come back to your mind.
Do you ever find though that, I use my intuition all the time, and I feel like that's what drives my paintings, but then do you ever worry that things become too familiar when you're just going on your own gut?
I think so. It has to be a balance of that, like, what happened before that was solid, that you really, really loved, at the same time, what are you doing now that is a brand new move to yourself, or something that feels super fresh, and you can kind of tie it in. Because I think that's, like, as painters, we don't want to be just kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. I think artists in general, but painting, we have that surface and the space to dig around and explore.
I think that the vocabulary that you, I think, are all alluding to is interesting. Of course, it changes form, like any language does, of course, but you can draw on what was effective, or provided the connection provided the communication maybe you were looking for in a past work.
If I can actually just draw on two pieces in the show, those two small paintings, I was thinking about these things lots as I made them. The composition of them are the same. They're the After John's paintings. But it was, in some way, it was against what you guys were talking about. Like, I've for a while in my work sort of fought to always bring something new. And lately in my practice, I found it really interesting to draw on the things that I've recently done, to try to recreate them. And I guess with these two little paintings, I wanted to have this simple composition and sort of take that out of the equation and just see what I could do with other elements, like specifically with these two paintings, color.
I got to spend some time with those paintings, Sean, and they're very different from what you usually do. And yeah, I noticed the two similar shapes. Like I think you've taken a trowel and scraped it across the surface. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't want to give away your secret.
No. I was putting the color down and almost erasing things. I don't know if you could tell that, like really pulling paint back off of the surface. And I think when we were talking about spontaneity, for me, the thing I was thinking about with these paintings, really allowing the paint to speak for itself, which is more easily seen in person when you can see these paintings. Like there's a lot about them that I wanted to communicate things, and which you can only do in paint. Like the red on that painting, it's very glossy. I wanted it really shiny. And on the other one, I tried to take all gloss out and just have it a very matte, flat painting.
In terms of,
but thank you, Sarah.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, the layering, that's another thing I wanted to bring up, is that you've all mentioned collage in one way or another, in very different ways, whether it's a collaging of physical materials or a collaging of images or physical paint layers. So I wonder how you all consider what collage means to you in the context of your current work. If Scott, you might want to start us off. I like the way that you were talking about collage and your painting process.
Sure. And I guess like my painting process has changed quite a bit in the last 5 years, where time has become a more important element in relation to what a material can do, how an oil can respond to a medium, a dryer, or you know, something that really alters what that oil is going to do on the canvas. And I used to be sort of pushing through a painting, say a single painting per day, start to finish, no time the next day to make any adjustments. It was kind of like, you know, fresh, wet until the painting was done. For the show that I recently had with Vivian, the process changed completely, where I gave myself, I would say, up to a month with each piece. And that's how this sort of like layering and collage process started happening. I guess masking and carving out of certain shapes and filling them with paint and waiting till those dried and then adding stains. Or so I guess like the idea of collage kind of works with the step-by-step process of what layers are happening next, how you can respond to a certain dry layer, how you can respond to a certain wet layer, and you know what that's going to do. Is it going to create something? Is it going to rub something out, or create cracks, or you know, just a kind of that physical presence of paint is, I guess, how I was looking at collage, or the step-by-step process of putting paint on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, Sean, you were talking about collage in terms of a collaging of materials, or your source materials, which are images of like photographs or personal items, and thinking about, and old works too, as I recall from our
other
conversation.
paintings.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I used to make collages to sort of begin, and now I'm finding that sort of on the go in the studio, holding a photo up, holding a color up in front of me, trying to see how it'll look, and then just trying to get it on the canvas really quick and sort of 3-dimension as I paint as I go, or collage as I paint. Like, it's sort of this new concept to me, and I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been fun.
And then so I was wondering too what the ways are that you are all foreseeing to connect with your viewing audiences, because your works are all largely non-representational. I wonder what parts of your painting or your practice that you intend viewers to connect with. Yeah, Sarah, you might want to take us off here.
Yeah, sure. Well, my works are really laborious, and I spend a lot of time with them, like up close. And I'm hoping that viewers approach them and see the full form, and then are drawn closer and then closer. And then I really want them to get as close as I do when I'm making them, so that I just think that, you know, you can get lost in these bodies and then forget what the shape is. And so it might look representational from afar, and then you forget what that shape was and get lost in the lines and the marks, and seeing my hand there, and noticing the materials. Mm-hmm. And yeah, because all of those lines are really tiny. And so I think it's a push-pull, I think, that we were describing it as.
Yeah. I know, Serena, that you had mentioned that too, and how you're handling your materials, that you insist on letting viewers see that it's been your hand, that there are little shakes and very slight incongruencies with the way you are handling a mark.
Exactly. I relate so much to what you just said, Sarah. The thinking that the viewer could maybe get a little bit closer and lost in maybe there's not as many lines to get lost into, like your work, but there's definitely the handmade aspect of the painting that they could maybe start questioning more, or like spending a little bit more time with it in some ways to, I guess, just see how it's made, and it's not just in the first answer maybe that they could think of, but also, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. that I relate.
I spent a lot of time with your work also, Serena. This close.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Can you see the brush marks in your work, Serena? I know those edges are really quite compelling when you get up close to see them, but I mean, we were talking a little bit about paint itself, and I know you and Tara last night were talking about mixing colors specifically, but I mean, can you talk about that surface a little bit more?
Yes, it is quite, I guess I'm quite stubborn because I really try to work my surface where you don't really see the brush strokes, which would make it so much easier if I was to use tape, because I have to work sort of fighting also the drying process of acrylics, so that my line is how I want it to be, but also the thickness of the paint is the right thickness, and the brush strokes are not going in every ways. And I also work on wood panels, so I have to think about the grain of the wood also. If my brush doesn't go with the grain of the wood, then you start having lumps of paint where you see the brush strokes. So I guess I just like the challenge of making it look in that way without using the tape that would really make the process super fast and quite graphic.
Serena,
Yeah.
what's your failure rate? Like, so when you create a piece, because they look so precise and tight from this perspective, and I've seen them up close too, but this idea that you have like a drawing or a design and a structure that you're aiming for, how many of them are you just basically, you know, oh, I messed this up, I've got to trash it or restart the design? Or do you go back, is there a way to go back in to fix a certain area?
I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot that I just don't finish them when they don't feel right, usually, when I mess them up. Or I try to fix them to change one color. Then I could maybe that would be the one moment where I use some sort of collage in my work. I would cut the shape in a paper, and then change the color and then put it on it and see what would be the effect of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha.
So that's one way of trying to fix my error. But there's definitely many of them that are just half started in the studio that I don't go all the way in. Yeah. What about you, Scott?
Like I put a knife through one just today. Like this morning, I came to the studio and I was like,
wow,
this one has to go. Like it just wasn't, it felt like it got to a point where I couldn't be adding more. I had gotten to a point where like, it's kind of like, it wasn't very interesting to me to get into. Like I didn't feel interested to redevelop what was happening. And for me, it just becomes like, get it off the stretcher, restretch it, re-gesso, and start fresh again. And
so
sorry. Yeah, that to me feels like a better step than to try to rework something, or because it just ends up feeling overworked.
I understand, but you feel the need to destroy it to put a knife in it, because
Yes,
that's interesting.
100%.
That's interesting.
Slice right through the top.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'm wondering too about the significance of time for each of you. It's that's come up a lot too. That it seems that you are really making the most of what time can offer you as a forced extension of slowing down or offering more room to consider as you're working. Is this true? Want to talk about that, Scott?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, in my works, I'm attempting to create an environment that is a moment in time. And so everything that goes against that is like painting is everything that is different from like the snapshot of, say, a camera. And in these environments that I make, it is meant to be this moment in space and time that I then try to work out with painting. So time becomes this, you know, like I mentioned before, this process of layering and developing and adjusting and removal and adding and things like that. But ultimately, I think the result is meant to be this sort of pinpointed like event or experience that you can kind of wander into and explore, and see these relationships with color and see relationship with shape and these sort of formal elements of abstraction, while still attempting to understand this space as a potentially, you know, a truth, or, you know, like this narrative that's happening, this sort of honest fiction.
In terms of timing, Sarah, I know you had talked about how you come in and out of works. I think there's one that's mocking you right now in your studio, isn't it? It's just
Yeah.
stares at you every day.
Yeah, I did work on it a little bit today. It's
Oh,
great.
nice. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Sean and I had a studio visit a couple years ago, and Sean was saying, have you thought about just, you know, taking less time? and I said, no, I have to take more time. And so, yeah, that's where we're different. Taking an extraordinary amount of time, really, I think it's like an act of caring, and it's not that you don't care, Sean, but it's just the time infused. I want you to be able to see it, and I want it to be evident. Every single brush stroke I make is there, and I could just keep adding more and more and more, and I'd probably be more satisfied.
Those are nice memories, thinking of that studio visit. Sarah, if I could just jump in, because we had that conversation at a time where I had flipped. I was trying to make paintings faster. I had been spending too much time on paintings, because unlike Scott, I can't seem to put a knife through my canvases. I just want to keep working and working and working and working. And I seem to have like 3 paintings on a single canvas before I can actually finish the thing. So and that became really important for a long time, of like just getting this process of just painting more, and having these a whole bunch of layers before I could really start to try to finish the painting. And it was at that time when Sarah and I spoke, where I was trying to take these 5 steps, you know, and try to cut them to 2 or cut them to 1. And it was this really sort of interesting time in the studio, and it still is, because I'm still trying to get these processes down where I can make these paintings faster. And it changed a lot of the ways that I was working, or I was thinking about my work. I think it got me out of a rut that I was in. And like I said, I'm still working on those things today, because even the paintings in the gallery are many layers and currency of truth. The painting with the band of red on the left, that was a painting I thought I had done, and I think was in my studio for about 2 years. And then shortly before Art Toronto here, I just jumped back into it, and sort of am now at the point where I was really happy with it and excited to show it.
So I wonder too, you probably get this question all the time, but because all of you have expressed that you don't entirely know exactly what the work is going to look like when you start into a painting, so you don't have a finished goal of what you are working towards in terms of an image. So when do you know when something's done? Or is there a signal that you're looking for? This probably comes back into an intuitive piece as well. When you feel like it's time to let it go or stab it, or, you know, you call it for what it is, either way.
I
Serena,
know,
how about
oh,
you?
sorry.
Oh.
I know when I'm done at the moment that I don't hate it.
Okay. Okay.
That
Sure.
makes sense, Sarah. I know that I'm done. There's some that I can't really explain. It's just, again, intuitive. It just clicks. I know it's done, that one. There's some that have to go through some sort of a time where they have to get like vetoed or something, or they're kind of like, I don't have the word in English, but they're just like, I have to wait a little bit, and I have to come back at the studio and look at them every day and try to look at them with fresh eyes and question, does it work or not?
Mhm.
And so if after a period of time, I'm not sure that it works, then it's not good. But if after a little while, sometimes it just clicks, or you want to change one small thing, just often with my paintings, it might be just a tone. Just one shape has to be a little bit darker or a little bit lighter. And that can come after a month after thinking that the painting was finished. But yeah.
I'm on the same page as that, where I'll finish a work and in my gut and my brain, I'm like, absolutely, the painting is done. But then it's got to sit in the studio for about a month to dry. And so that I get more time with it. And it's, it's like listening to the same song over and over again. The first time you heard it, it's brilliant. The 10th time you're like, there might be something a bit better, and so, yeah, there's some works that go through that process of like, I'm so like hyped and pumped about the work. And then a month goes by of just drawing here in the studio, and other works have been produced. And then I'm like, you know what? It doesn't really work. It's not fitting. I'm not happy with it. Oh, I'm going to put a knife in it. So it might be that, or because that's the thing. Like, I don't want to like overwork something so much that it just becomes this like surface of thick paint, because it's usually these like layering that goes on. Sorry, these like extra layers of paint that go on the other ones that eventually, if some of them dry, you can't take them off because they're kind of permanent. Kind of the same thing.
What about you, Sean?
I get going to what I was trying to say when I was speaking last. This is something I've really changed my mind on. I think when a painting, as I'm working on a painting and it starts taking me in other directions, I start getting lots of ideas from it again. I think that's when I know it's done, and I try to move on to another canvas. Where in the past, I would have tried to bring those ideas onto that piece. Where now it's just like, try to get that on something else, start again. It's a good sort of leapfrog. And I think ties in conceptually to what I'm trying to get to with a lot of these works. Like it's this like iteration of myself or of reality, trying to get to these ideas of representing the world, and how that can be done in many ways. It can be misconstrued, it can be unbalanced, you're not sure about it. And have that painting carry in, and hopefully I can make other paintings from it, if that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Okay, I will ask this question. It's come out in financial terms, but I'm interested to know because you are all working with Abstraction, which obviously is a very intentional choice. So I wondered, what is Abstraction's most challenging liability and greatest asset, as it were, if that makes any sense to propose? Like, what's the toughest thing you have to manage, and what's the most likely element of satisfaction? Perhaps. I'm not going to call on anyone to answer this specifically, because I want you all to have time to think, and you can answer as you like. Can
you start, Tara? I'd love to hear what you think on this topic.
Well, I would think that that's a good question. I think that for me as a viewer, I didn't realize how hard it was to be an abstract painter until I tried myself and proceeded to very promptly give it up. That wasn't going to happen. So for me, the difficulty with Abstraction was that I didn't know how to evoke something. I knew what worked when I saw it, but I didn't know how to get there. So it was like this this gray, this indefinite gray area, until sometimes I would make something. I was like, oh, this worked. And yeah, it was at that time, it was an advisor at OCAD, and that, they would ask me like how I made it. It's like, I don't know. So for me, that always seems to be a very difficult thing with abstraction. And I'm sure that because of all of you have had much more experience building your vocabulary and understanding what gestures have been successful, that you've been able to create maybe a toolbox to like what has worked for you in the past to achieve the desired effect, even if you had maybe only a loose idea of it. In terms of an asset, I think it works the same way. When I see great abstract work, it's like, man, that's good. It's just like, I don't know why, but it's like a gut instinct thing. It's like, I don't know. And I love too those works that have hit me that it's like, why is this so powerful? But that's the beauty of it.
I get like I'm always trying to find color combinations that are a bit haunting, a bit awkward, a bit unsettling, a bit strange together. And when those pairings happen within a painting, possibly next to something that just really, really like is very comfortable, like that kind of a pairing is what I look for in my painting. Color combinations, color relationships, and how they make somebody feel, not just like, oh, that pink goes really well with that dark green, but why is that pink next to the bright orange? And those kinds of things, kind of like power clashing. I look at a lot of fashion. I look at a lot of fashion when I like try to figure out palettes as well.
That's an interesting source.
Yeah.
I could see that though. Anyone else want to take a look at the question?
I think that abstraction has the power to express like a kind of interiority, as opposed to, like drawing a picture of something or creating an illusion. There isn't necessarily an illusion of reality. It's like something new that's happening. But I think that then the drawback is that people feel that they don't understand it. And I think that it would be, I think that it's for everybody. And I hope that people understand that abstract art or art is for everybody. It's not for certain people who understand it or don't understand it. It might just be that you don't like it if something seems like it doesn't make sense.
I've always been a hard encourager of, especially for members that maybe aren't so actively engaged with going to exhibitions or art viewing, they maybe feel like they're excluded from those kinds of experience because they don't have the education or the past understanding of how to behave in those spaces. But it's always, I've always enjoyed just people to have an opinion. And if they hate it, that's great. Like try and find out why. But just an opinion is fantastic. Like I love people. I love walking around sometime and especially with public art, and you might catch someone and be like, I don't like this. It's terrible. It offends me. It's like, good. Like what more? Why? But I think that, that all makes sense. It's nice for it to be able to swing either way quite drastically too, I find, with abstraction more so than maybe even representational work.
Yeah, if I was to try to answer your last question, I think it's its history, and I think this is painting at large. Like the history of it is in some ways its greatest liability because it can make it esoteric, or in some ways you have to know so much about it before you can understand it. But in other ways, I think its greatest liability. I think the way that painters can talk to painters who came before them in the past, that becomes a really important thing in the work. And again, something I thought about embracing much more lately.
Yeah, and I'd like to, so certainly again, if anyone wants to put in any questions, of course, we are very happy to take a look at those. Going off of what you just said, Sean, I wanted to ask you all about significant mentor or mentee relationships. If there are particular individuals, it could be an influence of a group, or if you were able to offer guidance to students, as it were, because I know a couple of you are active teachers. If there were any experiences that maybe have stuck out for you and your focus in your current work. Serena, what do you think?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if I was muted or not, and I wasn't. I think, well, for sure, I could say maybe more for influence than mentors. I'm not sure I had one particular mentor, but I've always been influenced by the minimalist movement from the 50s, 60s, going a bit in the 70s of the United States. So artists, like I said, we talked yesterday, Tara, about Antrit. That would be a big influence for me. Yeah, I guess also just people around me, having conversation with people, it for sure, it gives you inspiration, and it sort of forms you towards something, towards working towards something more than something else. Meeting René Blouin also from the gallery in Montreal here, it felt a bit like a mentorship, I could say, just for the fact that he had worked with amazing artists like Yves Gaucher. He actually worked with him, and he would tell me stories of when he would come to the gallery and bring his art piece. And I met his son through him, the son of Yves Gaucher. So that's for sure feeling like, and meeting Francine Savard also in Montreal, someone that I've always looked at her work to be, that was always inspiring to me. That for sure is crazy to have met those people and feel like I can actually have a conversation with them about what I'm working on and about what they work on, and I guess feel a little bit more like part of a conversation in the end.
Anybody else?
I guess early on in my final years at NASCAD was Gary Neil Kennedy, which he does completely different work than I do, but it was all about color. And that's what I took a lot from him. And then being in Toronto, kind of forming relationships. Stephen Andrews has been an incredible mentor in terms, just getting together and chatting about painting and what it can mean. He has a show up at Paul Petra right now, so we had a good chat about time and space and material. So yeah, it was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my time in Calgary. Thinking about mentors, some of the professors I had in art school, Mark Mullen, Chris Kranz specifically. It was yeah, quite a time to work with them. I've recently started one here in Toronto. I started working for an artist as an assistant, and kind of, I think what was most compelling about the job was to see how things are done at scale on a very full-time basis for him. So that's been a good way to spend some of these quarantine months.
My supervisor at Emily Carr was Landon McKenzie, and we work in a similar way. In fact, she has a lot of maps in her large paintings, and so it was kind of weird to be with somebody whose work is similar, and that I think that actually helped me define what my practice was and what compared to what her practice was.
We have a couple questions from our attendee members. So the first from Ruby, please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, is where are you gaining inspirations of forms from? So I would say this would readily provide some interesting answers from all of you as well. So yeah, Sabrina, if you want to go, because I know we talked about this yesterday, but especially with some of the architecture around you, it was interesting discussion.
Yeah. So yeah, I get the form ideas are usually coming from, yes, architecture, but not directly. I don't want to paint them directly like I see them. It's more just, I think it's almost more like they brainwash me, the shapes. I don't know. I'm going to explain it further. So they're, because I see them all the time, then they come out when I draw. And it just sort of makes sense. It's really simple, but and then when they come back so often, because the first step of my process is to draw some lines and shapes, and when the shape come back so often, then it sort of makes it relevant in some ways, and then I paint it after. So that's kind of like the process of how the forms come to life in the painting.
Sarah, I know you've had some interesting relationship with form development between the maps, as you were talking about earlier, and certainly your organic creatures that maybe are just emerged.
Yeah, I guess my forms are inspired by maps, but also by like horror genre. Like I'm thinking about monsters and but also it's like a spontaneous form that sometimes I try to capture just by like pouring paint onto a piece of paper, or like the painting that's being shown right now. Those are leech forms that I drew a whole bunch of leeches one summer from life, and they've made their way into my paintings, just magnified. And yeah, so they're micro, macro, but also organic and monstrous.
A few years ago, I did a show just on these sort of temporary habitations. So I was thinking about birdhouses, motels, tents, and this kind of like dismantling of structure and dismantling of systems, and that's sort of carried through to the recent show at Vivian Art, where it was just all about sailing, however that came to be. I'm not quite sure. It came through sketches and drawings, but like, yeah, it was all about this sort of breaking down of imagery and forms that relate to sailing, this sort of leisure, and how it relates to peril at the same time.
In my paintings, a lot of the composition or the forms are sort of brought forward from the photographs that I'm looking at. I want there to be that place that's recognizable, even though it isn't specific. But just loosely put in something, or really specifically a horizon line. That's really important in my work, sort of to ground yourself and give you some perspective, something to look into or know that you're looking out from. So yeah, for me, it starts with those photographs and then sort of moves forward with painting, and things move out from there.
Okay, and another question I have from David. He's wondering if there is an aspect of your painting techniques that generate abstracted compositional elements that are not deliberate, so a way of introducing chance into the painting. Whoever might want to jump in on this.
100%. The process is 50% chance, where paint is going to move in a certain way, where you think you have control, but then it moves in a sense, and it gets next to a color that you're not really sure about, and so you have to make adjustments. I feel like Serena, our processes are quite different, where we're just kind of, I'm kind of playing with this like free motion of paint and letting it drip and letting it fall and letting it glob over and drag and scrape and that kind of stuff. So, that kind of like physical action with the paint, it is inevitable that that there is chance a part of that. And sometimes, sometimes there's a painting that I'll do, and at first I'll be like, I got to fix that. It's a mistake. But then I'll sit with it for a bit and I'll realize, no, it kind of works. It's like, it's going to sit there and relate to other things too.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say we sort of have a opposite process, you and I, because my first instinct for answering this question was nope, there's no chance element. Just a big nope. But for sure, there always is a chance element because you can't control everything. And I think maybe there's something there where I try to control everything in some ways with those paintings. But there's definitely the fact that it's hand painted, the lines, and the fact that I still have to change the ratio of the shape sometimes, or just the color because it doesn't dry like you expected, or because it just doesn't work. So there's always a chance element in the end, but my first instinct is nope.
I've been trying to pull a lot of paint and also do these transparent layers sort of halfway through, or sort of the final moves on some of these paintings. And for me, that's all about chance because I can't control the paint at all. And it's trying to create these surfaces that are things that only paint can do. And so yeah, it's actually been moving more and more in the realm of spontaneity or letting painting decide on some things. Because as Scott pointed out earlier, a lot of times my first instinct after these things will happen or the paint is dry is just get rid of it, and often that's sometimes the worst thing you can do.
Sean, would you say that you're like letting all this crazy stuff happen and then you move out of control, and then just adding that horizon line at the end allows you to cover up over all the spontaneity and bring it back to what you meant, or like make it familiar again?
I think, yeah, I think that last bit is what you were saying there, Sarah, I think is really important. There does need to be some trigger, I think, in this work of familiarity. So sometimes, yeah, I've pushed these paintings too far. I know when I was talking to Tara last, I had just wrecked the painting and I was really upset about it because only an hour earlier, I was really happy with it. But I felt in some ways I was figuring out this process of doing these translucent layers at the end, and I just sort of erased the whole painting.
Liberating.
Yeah.
But
what about for you, Sarah? Because I know chance plays a lot with how you start a lot of these works, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying before, I just pouring paint on a piece of paper. I don't know what's going to happen, and so like all those little tendrils that are coming out of that work there just happened by the way that the paint flowed and dried, and I happened to love it, so I used that one. So yeah, it is essential in determining the composition.
Do you try to balance that sort of order and chaos? Like, is that something?
Oh yeah, would you say that I like got a little OCD there on the drawing part? Yes.
I think it's interesting when you say the balance of chaos, like balancing the chaos, because I think that in the end, that's kind of what we're all saying, but our chaos is just different from each of us. What we define as this is correct, or this is ordered, or this is what I wanted it to be, or where it feels okay not knowing versus knowing what you're going to do. It's all different for us, but there's always a moment where we don't know, and there's the chance element is there. Mm-hmm. Anyways,
that's a really good point.
I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I was really interested for this one. other than abstraction, what are your favorite art forms? Like, what do you look towards just for pure enjoyment, not necessarily as a research or study, but just something you like to look at? For anybody who wants to start.
Films, cinematography, fiction, novels, usually from Spanish or South American writers.
I like drone music and weird fiction.
I don't know what drone music is.
It's really boring.
Do you mean bagpipes?
Oh, I thought-
like bagpipes?
I love bagpipes, honestly.
Same here.
No,
Same.
no.
Same. My mom plays. Hi, mom.
Oh, that's sweet.
I think drone music makes sense with your work, Sarah. Do you listen to drone music while you make it or not?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah? Okay,
There's,
that
like,
makes sense. Yeah.
Noise.
Can you hear the music when you look at your paintings?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Or if I'm listening to podcasts, I know exactly what I was listening to when I made that brushstroke.
That's true. Definitely for me, there's a lot of podcasts. That's something I really enjoy when I'm not painting. Films. I like music and I like to read. I like all of them. And dancing too.
Me too.
Yeah, I do like listening to fiction when I make paintings. It's either music or fiction, but there are certain paintings I can hear books, or I hear the music that I was listening to when I was making them.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to sign us off. But thank you so much for being able to join me tonight and all of our artists. And I wanted to draw everyone's attention again too into the chat box. So you're gonna see a link to that video that was made with all of our artists here, Sean, Serena, Scott, and Sarah. They're all included in this video. Really great segments from all. And thank you all to those joining us in for the chat. I think this was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
thanks to
Very
Sarah and Serena, first time meeting you basically.
Yeah, I've never met you.
Yes,
So-
yes. First
Oh, it's
time
even
meeting
better.
all of you for me. Nice to meet you. It was great
Yeah,
conversation.
Same.
Yeah, I was hoping that this would happen because I didn't know how many of you had had too much time with each other before. So it's like, well, it's gonna be a good peer group
Yeah.
experience too,
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
it's
a
amazing.
retreat.
Yeah, we rarely see each other all at once because we're not all at once in the gallery, so it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's the benefit. Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all again, and we'll hope to talk to you again very soon. Congratulations on the wonderful exhibition and the works that you've made to include and share with it. And please visit the gallery's website as well at vivianart.com, and you can see all of the images of works available and more details for those artists included. So I hope everyone has a wonderful evening ahead, and we talk to you soon again.
Thanks, Tara.
Thanks
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks,
Have a great
Sarah.
evening,
Everyone.
everyone.
Bye.